Hey, what's up, everybody? It's that guy Skimpy. Got my buddy Kyle. He's gonna do a demo today. What you gonna do a demo on?
On pitching and flipping.
All right, let's do this. Word.
Hello, my name's Kyle. Here with Lakewood Master Bassers, giving a little talk about flipping and pitching. The real main thing with this is when you're flipping. Honestly, for me, I only use that when I'm set on one fish. I can actually see the fish, and I want more of a subtle entry into the water. You know, a lot of people think pitching and flipping is synonymous, but it's actually two completely separate, different actions. When you have a set depth and a set area where you actually want your lure to land, is a good time to flip. You know, the reel's not even open. You kind of just want to take exactly how much line you want and then feed it back into your target area to where you can see where the fish is at. It doesn't have that big cannonball entry into the water. It's a lot more subtle. But I feel it's not something you can really cover a ton of water fast with doing. So like I said, not only 5% of the time do I actually flip. You know, lures, pitching and flipping, you can kind of use the same thing. If I'm fishing a lot of stained water, I like to use a jig. This is a Missile Baits Iconelli flipping jig, paired up with a Missile Baits Baby D-Bomb. Silver Lake was great. I find that to be a great, place to actually, use a jig. The water's more stained, and when I'm using, a flipping or pitching technique in stained water, I will actually use 65-pound braid. I don't feel that the fish are really going to see it when the water's dirty, and you're probably going to flip into some nasty stuff, and you want to get that fish out as soon as possible.
What brand braid do you like the best?
This is P-line. I mean, once you get up to 65 pounds, I really, it doesn't matter.
It's rope.
Right. I like to use a heavy rod. This is a 7.5. Mainly I use this rod for flipping more than pitching. Because like I said, if I'm flipping, I can actually see the fish, and I want to be backed off more. And I use, a little bit of a longer rod to give me just a little bit more line to get it out there. When I'm pitching, I'm typically close in, and I use a shorter rod, which would be this 7-foot right here. Now when I'm in clear water, I actually will go all the way down to a 12-pound mono. Even if I'm in really thick, nasty stuff, I let the rod do the work. I don't like to put a lot of pressure on the line itself. There's actually a little bit of a art to that. Learn a lot more actually doing salmon fishing than anything else. But in clear water, I like to use more of a Texas rig setup with a flipping straight shank hook, a tungsten bullet weight, and then a rubber bobber stopper to keep that weight pegged down to the hook. Now there's two thoughts on that. If you ask Sean Grigsby, he hates pegging it. He feels when he goes to set the hook, the weight will actually open up the fish's mouth and he doesn't get as many hook sets, that way. Personally, I like pegging it. I think it goes through lily pads and brush way easier. When it's just sliding freely, you do have a lot of kind of looseness that can get wrapped around twigs and such. I mean, if it gets to the point where I'm losing that many fish, then maybe I'll change it, but I've never had an issue with it. Weight-wise, I love tungsten. You get a lot of weight with a little bit of size. It just doesn't get in the way as much, and kind of back to prying open the fish's mouth when you set the hook, it's not as big and bulky. The type of baits that I'll use for that will differ on what's going on. So I like to start with something a little bit smaller that doesn't have a ton of appendages. Something like this little 3.5-inch little woolly bug plastic here. It's got a few appendages. It'll displace a little bit of water, and it's smaller. I like to start with that and see how the fish are biting it. So if they're completely just running off with it when they bite, I'll probably bulk it up at that point because they're just being really aggressive. Whereas, you know, if they're just kind of sitting there, picking it up and just sitting with it, you know, that tells me they're not as aggressive. And I may even go to something that doesn't have any appendages, kind of like a Cinco type right here, that's not as aggressive. If they are picking it up and just hammering it, I'll even go up to a 7.5, you know, brush hog like this. You know, I kind of let the fish bite tell me what they want. Now, even with that, you know, if you're using something smaller, you don't want a lot of appendages, but you do want to bulk up a little bit. A bait that I think is very underutilized here in Washington is just a regular ribbon-tailed worm. You know, that works great too. But like I said, I like to let the fish kind of tell me what they want. Color-wise, you know, match the hatch. I'll use a lot of greens, purples, oranges. I feel when you pitch or flip into something that's a lot of cover, when it drops in front of their face, I don't think they're really sitting there like, oh, that's orange, not purple, I'm not going to eat it. With that, you know, when I do pitch, I'm looking to cover a lot of water and hit a lot of high target areas quickly. So I got the boat motor on like 10 almost, and just hitting everything I can almost as fast as I can. Now if you do run onto like a treetop where you want to slow down a little bit, my biggest advice is always start on the furthest out section of that treetop and work your way back. You catch a fish that's at the base of that tree and you're fighting that fish all the way back through, you can spook the other fish that possibly could be sitting out front. So I always work my way from the deepest point of a tree and then work my way back. But that's the main thing with pitching, is you just get that bait in your hand, you're going down the bank, and you're just hitting as much stuff as you can. Not a big fan of bouncing it 5, 6, 7 times. I do once or twice and then going about my day. As the day goes, you can kind of see the fish, you know, what they want to position on. And then once you kind of get that dialed in, you can actually skip a lot of stuff and maximize your fishing time on whether they're wanting big, thick, you know, treetops, or lay down logs, or sparse, you know, lily pads if they're in between. Once again, I kind of let the fish tell me what they want, and then I go in after it. Don't be scared to throw a big bait. Don't be scared to throw a small bait. Like I said, just let the fish kind of tell you what they want. You know, I think another thing is too, is a lot of people get scared to put their lures in danger. And by that, I mean, if I think there even is a little piece of water, yay big, and brush, I put my lure there. And you got to hit those high target areas where a lot of people aren't going to hit. Don't be scared. It's just hooks and weights. You break it off, so what, tie up, keep going about your day. But you have to put your bait in danger, and you will catch a lot of fish. You know, I found I do best on days where the air pressure is climbing or it's high. A lot of times under high pressure, the bass will get super tight on the brush and they don't, you know, aren't very active in feeding. And I find that is a very good time where everybody else is throwing spinnerbaits or chatterbaits, looking for active fish that aren't going to be active that day, to take your time and hit super close up against, you know, structure, whether it be lily pads, brush piles. But that high air pressure, I think those are the days I've had best flipping or pitching. Short of that, that's about it. You know, just don't be scared. Don't be scared to put that motor down fast and cover a lot of water until the fish kind of tell you what they want, and then you can really key in on certain things, and then you can slow down and start taking your time. And this also is really good for lily pads as well. A lot of thick pads, I will punch that Texas rig through there, really not have any issues. To me, I really like to key on when pads or grass kind of jets out to a point and hit those areas. You can hit a whole pad field that's flat and the same, not get a bite, but as soon as as soon as there's a spot that's different than the others, you know, I typically get bit. When it's like super hot outside and there's not a lot of shade, you'll see a lot on these clearer lakes. You know, those big pad fields will create a ton of shade for those bass. They don't want to be stuck out in the sunshine. I find that's a good time. When they're feeding on a bluegill spawn or a crappie spawn is phenomenal around pads. even then I will go and start pitching a swim bait on a Texas rig. Even with that, once you're done bouncing it through the pads, you can even swim that back to you a little bit, you know, when you're done, and get a lot of bites that way. But I love keying in on that when there's a bluegill or a crappie spawn going on, because they love spawning around those pads as well. What else? So reels. I love fast reels, right? The faster the better. The faster you can get that bait back in your hand when you're done, the faster you're putting that bait back out there. So I go and get the fastest reels I possibly can for this technique.
Which are?
7-3-1s is typically what I use. So, any other questions, concerns?
I noticed that you're using a lot of like beaver style baits. Do you use tubes?
So flipping tubes.
Flipping tubes?
It's starting to become real popular for popular people. I like those a lot. They mimic bait really well, and they actually have a little bit more of a spiraling fall to them when you do pitch and flip those. I'm still starting out with those. Not enough feedback yet to know if I really like it, but I think I'm going to like it a lot. And it's real slender too. You know, it gives you that same small compact as like this little woolly bug, but kind of a different look without the appendages. So that'd be a good bait to go to when they're not being super aggressive. And it's just a different look. I mean, a lot of people aren't doing that. So it just gives them something different to look at as well, for sure. Any other questions?
How important are the rattles?
Or rattles?
Yeah.
I don't use rattles at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. I'm not going to say it's not beneficial, but once again, I kind of feel like if that bait is going through that brush in front of that fish's nose, it's probably going to hit it or it's not.
So you're not going to call a fish in from
That's not what I'm trying to do. You know, I'm trying to hit the fish that are pegged right there. You know, when you're flipping, I mean, your bait's in the water seconds. You know, so a rattle isn't going to pull one from far away in. It's just not going to be in the water long enough for that. And it's just a good way to get a bait in areas that you're not going to get a crankbait or a chatterbait, you know, or anything along those lines. You're just, you know, a lot of people hit the outskirts of that stuff, but I can't emphasize enough. Get in the middle of it. You know, don't be scared. And that's my biggest thing. Is just put the bait in danger. I like to feed the bait to the fish, so I will actually point my rod tip right down to it. And then as I'm doing that, kind of reeling in to where the fish isn't really feeling the pressure as I'm going to it, but then all the slack is up, and then I just give it out. And get that fish out there as soon as you can. And then once it's out of the danger zone, then you can fight it or whatever. Really let your rod do the work though. I can't emphasize that enough. But yeah, I just really like to feed that bait to the fish when it hits before I set it up.
So when you blow up on them, you're not cranking hard or anything like that. You're just pulling with your rod.
I stick it. And then I actually try to use my leverage on the boat being up above it to just kind of lift it out before I start cranking. You crank too fast, I mean, you can crank that fish, you know, into a big brush pile, into an area that you're going to be way worse off than if you just try to pull that fish out first before you start fighting. Any other questions?
What's your preference on like weight?
Weight, you know, you can get away. I think that's a ½ ounce. If you're doing thick pads, 1.5 ounces. But really, that's where tungsten, even though it's expensive, becomes important because you're getting that weight without the actual bulkiness, size-wise, of that weight. So really, once again, it just depends on what you're fishing. If you're trying to punch like thick grass, you know, you're going to need something heavier. Now, if it's just brush, you know, ½ ounce would be more than enough, you know, to get that thing down there. Any other questions? No? Well, that was fun. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.